the most tactical, deliberate, resolute pirate on all the seas. The fearless, almost untouchable Trafalgar D. Warlord. Hello motherfuckers, welcome back to another Word channel. Today we will be getting back into my series of ranking the warlords, and this week is all about Law. Trafalgar Law. Basically a straw hat at this point. You know, he's been in the story for so long, and he is a warlord, so he is a part of this series. I did Boa Hancock, Buggy, Crocodile, Mihawk, and even Moria at this point. We're getting through the warlords one at a time. So before I start, please like and subscribe, and let's get into this. Captain of the Heart Pirates, who is currently 26 years old, born October 6th, standing at 191 centimeters or 6 foot 3 inches tall, with an outrageous bounty of 3 billion berries, and is the current user of the Ope no Mi, or the op fruit. And with his devil fruit, he has a few broken abilities, okay? I always say this with devil fruits, but this is one of my favorite devil fruits. I feel like it's a lot of people's favorite devil fruits, but it's a great devil fruit. He can create what he calls a room, a spherical space, which he can control anything, including people, for example, surgically cutting people up, not killing them in the process, just like separating, like say he wanted to take off somebody's arm, he could, and even put it back on. It's a very interesting fruit. But also he can swap other people's personalities and also teleport himself and others inside this room, this space of his. It's interesting. It's one of the, like, when you think about One Piece devil fruits, this is, once again, technical. It's a very technical devil fruit. And all that can be done with a flick of a finger. But the most important thing that this devil fruit can do, and what people talk about Law for in the story and in real life, and what people love this devil fruit for, is the fact that it can grant immortality. Okay? Is crazy. So basically, Law has to perform a surgery on somebody, and that grants them immortality. It's insane. The devil fruit is insane, but it comes at the cost of the user's life. Say Law did this, Doflamingo made Law do that surgery on Doflamingo. Law would die. It's really a double-edged sword of a devil fruit, but it's still broken nonetheless. But enough about Law's devil fruit. Let's get into his basic timeline. And we're going to start with the tragedy of Flevolence. I think that's how you say that name. Law was born in the North Blue in a country called Flevence. And it's also known as the White City from the amber lead that is mined here on Flevolence. His parents were doctors here, and they were training Law and his younger sister to be doctors themselves. But before long, the white lead poisoning was taking over the city, ravaging the city, and the parents of Law tried to help, but it was too much even for them. And on top of all this, a neighboring country and Flevolence were at conflicts with each other, and the neighboring country even came over to Flevolence and raided the entire city and ended up burning down Law's parents' hospital clinic, where his sister was inside of, and she unfortunately passes. It's sad. And then, right in front of Law, an extermination group. Hello? They're calling themselves extermination group because they're killing humans. Is nuts. It's insane. Ended up shooting Law's parents right in front of them, killing them both. And Law ended up escaping Flevolence under dead bodies that were being shipped out of the country. And this right here changed Law's personality forever. Okay, this is why he's so, like, cold-shouldered, cold-hearted, you know, to most people. In life after the tragedy of Flevolence, he ended up on Spider Mills Island, where the Don Quixote pirates were, and he ended up approaching Doflamingo with 3 bombs strapped to his chest. and told Doflamingo that he only has 3 years to live because Law does have the lead poisoning himself. And after this, Law meets Corazon, and he finds out Corazon actually doesn't like kids. And Corazon actually ends up kicking Law out of a window wherever they're meeting at here. But after this, Doflamingo reaches out his hand, not reaches out his hand, but gives Law a hand and says, "You can join my crew." And over the next few years, they went on to do, typical piratey things. And they all grew closer and closer, and some of them even went on to train Law during these years. But soon after this, Law has more and more white spots on his body, and he only has a year or less to live at this point. And so he goes on to tell the crew his real name and that he has a D. Corazon takes interest to this and tells Law to step away and come swap to meet real quick. And in this conversation, Corazon says if your name actually does have a D in it, to stay away from Doflamingo, because he reveals his actual true plan is to stop Doflamingo and put an end to everything that's going on, and it would somehow, some way just come in between this plan that he has. And he tells Law that he should leave Doflamingo's crew. And he even tells him about what the D means. But Law refuses and even says that he would expose Corazon to Doflamingo, but it takes a second to realize he shouldn't do that because Corazon actually didn't tell on him that Law stabbed him. After Corazon kicked him out of the window, Law ended up going on to stab him. And sometime after this, Corazon ended up going to take Law with him to find a healing agent for this white lead poisoning, to no avail. And this broke Corazon. Corazon was really finding himself very close to Law, and it broke him, and he started crying while Law was asleep. But Law wasn't actually asleep. He overheard him begging and pleading, to God, I guess, to find a cure for this white lead poisoning. And not only did this break Corazon, but this broke Law too. Law has gone for a while without, feeling like there's anybody that really gets him or supports him. So this was a heartfelt moment for Law, and I remember watching this, I was like, this is like Big Brother for real, And this made the two closer during this time, but Doflamingo ended up reaching out to see how the search was going for the cure. And Doflamingo ended up telling him about the ope fruit and how it could possibly cure Law's disease. And they later arrived at Minion Island, where the devil fruit was supposed to be, where he leaves Law in an abandoned village so he can go collect the devil fruit, and he ends up coming back, and force feeding the devil fruit to Law, but Law has second thoughts. But after Law sees that Corazon has scars on him, he was hurt, but Corazon ended up handing Law a letter to give to the Marines, and he ended up giving it to Virgo, who he ended up bringing back to Corazon, unaware that Virgo was a double agent working under Doflamingo. And he goes on to attack Corazon and Law, and ends up telling Law everything about how Corazon was also a double agent. And while Virgo was distracted, Law and Corazon actually ended up escaping before Doflamingo could make it. And he ended up putting Law in a chest and put a quiet shield around him, kind of like Law's room, so Law wouldn't be found. Telling Law that he loves him and allowing himself to be caught. And this is one of the saddest moments in One Piece history. Law is in this chest, crying, screaming, but once again, no one could hear him because Corazon put the quiet shield around him, so he's just in here in agony. While he can hear everything that's going on, Doflamingo is unfortunately killing his own brother, who is Corazon, and it's just sad. That's, oh my god, it's so fucked up. Oda is crazy. And after this, Doflamingo ends up leaving the island with a bunch of loot, including the chest that Law was in. But Doflamingo was able to escape while they were distracted, crying and, just in so much distress. over the loss of someone that gave Law light and hope in his dark world. Oh, it's just so sad. And Law ends up on a neighboring island where he runs into two boys, Penguin and Sachi. I think that's how you say his name. And they are bullying a young Beppo. And Law ends up beating them up for this. Okay, and after this, the three boys went on to dedicate themselves to Law, saying they want to join whatever faction Law has going on. And that is the creation of the Heart Pirates. And soon after this, Law ends up going on to not mastering, but learning more of his devil fruit, and actually cures his own white lead disease poisoning. Beautiful. It's beautiful. And the crew goes on to conquer the Grand Line, becoming big shots in the process. Law even receiving a 200 million berry bounty. Shout out to Law. Where they eventually end up on Sabaody. This is where we're introduced to Law. Everything that I was just talking about prior happened in Law's childhood. Okay? On Sabaody, the big three really go on to like Ora Farm in front of the auction house, where he ends up freeing a captain named Jean Bart, and the Heart Pirates end up escaping Sabaody unscathed. But he was later seen back at Sabaody watching the execution of Ace at Marineford, and as things go bad to worse, he ends up setting sail to Marineford, arriving at the very end, and this is the point where he asks Buggy to give Luffy to him, because Luffy also has a D in his name and he doesn't want to see other D's go down, so he was really adamant about saving Luffy. And they make their grand escape from Marineford, tending to both Luffy and Jinbei. And later he ends up handing both Jinbei and Luffy off to Boa and Ivankov, ends up setting sail from Amazon Lily. And during this sailing, he tells his crew that he's not ready for the new world and he's waiting for the right time, telling them to follow his orders and that he is trying to steal the proper throne. Very interesting from Law here. And this leads us into the 2-year time skip. And during the 2-year time skip, Law is held responsible for the Rocky Port incident, where he sends the heart of 100 pirates to the world government, which is insane. If you really think about it, that shit is nuts. 100 hearts? Who's this guy? And this is where he is invited to be part of the Warlord system. He is finally a Warlord. Let's go, Law. And his bounty actually increased to 440 million, but was frozen because he joined the Warlord system. And sometime before the events of Punk Hazard, he sends his crew to Zhao, where they will be safe because he is about to put his plan into action, his grand scheme into action. And now we're in post time skip, where Law is finally on Punk Hazard and makes a deal with Caesar, giving Caesar his heart in order to stay here. And later goes at it with Smoker, who was confused by Law being here, where he flips the marine vessel in an insane way. Okay, when I seen this on Punk Hazard, I took Law a lot more serious. I was like, okay, this guy, he's pretty cool. Okay, but around the time of Law interacting with Smoker, the Straw Hats show up for some reason, and everybody ends up switching personalities because of Law. Luffy goes on to thanking Law because Law is the one that took him to where he needed to go after Marineford. But Law ends up going back to the lab and is confronted by Caesar, who Caesar thinks that something is up. Caesar ends up pulling a gun out on Law, and Law diffuses the situation, asking him about the children that he keeps hearing about in the talks that he keeps having with these people on Punk Hazard. And Law is visibly disgusted by Caesar's answer, as any normal human should be, you know. And after this, he ends up going to help fight the Yeti Cool brothers with Luffy, not even really helping, just like taking them out for him real fast. And this is where the next few years, almost decade of the story, really comes into play. Law wants to create an alliance between himself and Luffy's crew, the Straw Hats, to take down one of the 4 emperors of the sea. Luffy accepts joyfully. They then go back to where the Straw Hats and the children were at, and Law ends up giving most of the Straw Hats back their bodies, their own personalities and stuff. And Law sets out with Chopper to find the medicine that they call candy to help these kids become more like calm, because they are kind of tweaking out in this cave. They then trick Monet into, having like a conversation while Chopper goes in and finds the candy. But it's all like stopped by Virgo, who knocked Law unconscious, putting him into a cage. And as he becomes conscious, he is then told by Caesar that he still has his heart. Virgo squeezes his heart. Law goes back unconscious, because that shit has to hurt. I hate looking at it when it happens, because it just it cringes me out. It's like sick. And during this time, Luffy and a few other Straw Hats and even Smoker were also captured and were put in this cage and sent them outside to be swallowed by Smiley, the giant gas monster thing that is on Punk Hazard. But Law goes on to help them escape eventually, because Law is really the mastermind of all these situations here. You gotta just keep walking. And somehow Law even convinces Smoker into helping to escape this hellhole of an island. And Law eventually goes back into the laboratory, into the sad manufacturing room, I guess, and is once again met with Virgo, who still has his heart and squeezes the shit out of it once again. Law is immobilized, but is saved right in the nick of time by Smoker. During the fight of Virgo and Smoker, Law ends up getting his heart back somehow. Like, he just sneaks in and grabs it or whatever. And he notices that Doflamingo is watching all of this unfold. And it gives him a great opportunity and idea. He ends up cutting not only the entire lab, but the surrounding mountains as well, including Virgo himself, in half. This is one of the most Aura Farmer moments in One Piece. Like, when I seen this, like I said, when I seen him flip the ship earlier, I was like, okay, guy, you're cool. But this right here solidified Law for me, leaving Virgo to die by the incoming smoke or poison that is Smiley, and it's taking over the lab. So Smoker and Law make it back to where everyone else was, and Luffy ends up going on to defeat Caesar, and they all end up escaping to the edge of the island. They then give the children to Smoker and end up leaving Punk Hazard. And on their way to Dressrosa, Law calls Doflamingo and tells him he has 24 hours to resign as a warlord. That's the only way he will get Caesar back. And he goes on to tell the rest of the Straw Hats his plan on Dressrosa, that he wants to disrupt the underground weapons economy and destroy the Smile factories. And with this, the first part of Law's plan is complete, taking out the sad manufacturing, where they arrive at Dressrosa, and Doflamingo actually complies and resigns as a warlord. And Law planned on keeping his promise to Doflamingo, giving Caesar back on Greenbit, but also this was really just a distraction so they could get into Dressrosa and destroy the Smile factory, whatever. And he gives the Straw Hats that objective of destroying the factory. When Law's group makes it to Greenbit, they are a bit concerned, and they end up finding out that Doflamingo actually didn't resign as a warlord. It was all just a ploy. And Law is then confronted by not only Doflamingo, but Admiral Fujitora is also here, and they actually go on to jump Law, basically. Okay, Law tries to escape with Caesar, but they're not having it. This is where he finds out Doflamingo was actually a world noble and is that was a revelation to all of us. But Law ends up escaping with Room, taking Caesar with him, and eventually making it back to the Thousand Sunny, where he leaves Caesar in the care of Sanji's group, where Law stays back to fight Doflamingo on the bridge and end up actually in front of the Colosseum. Within this time, they go on to really aura form. We see more of Law's technique, more of Doflamingo's technique. It's a beautiful fighting scene, I'm not gonna lie. And like I said, they end up in front of the Colosseum in an unfortunate Law's defeat, okay? And in front of Luffy and Zoro, Doflamingo goes on to shoot Law, which is nuts. That was, once again, a crazy moment for me. I love Dressrosa. I know Dressrosa gets a lot of hate, but like, there's just moments that just make my heart just like, ooh. And this is where Doflamingo takes Fujitora and Law back to the Dressrosa Palace with the plans to make an example out of Law. And here on the palace, they interrogate him, but Law doesn't budge. And later on, when the toys are finally freed, Luffy comes to Law's rescue, but they are soon thrown from the castle out of a window down to the ground. Pika at this point had already moved around Dressrosa, so it was messy. And this is where Doflamingo uses his iconic bird cage for Dressrosa. But eventually Luffy and Law make their way back up to the palace where Doflamingo is. And up here it is Law versus Doflamingo while Luffy is fighting Trouble. And Law hits Doflamingo with an injection shot, and this shakes Doflamingo to his core. And at this point we're seeing more and more and more of Law's abilities, and I don't know, am I a glazer of Law? But Doflamingo goes on to cut off Law's right arm with the plans to kill him with lead bullets, and that is very just crazy because he helped save him from the, the white lead poisoning. It's crazy. It would have been a full circle moment. But he is saved by Luffy. And then Doflamingo goes on to tell Law that he wants him to perform the eternal youth or eternal life surgery on Doflamingo. And Law says he'll do it, but only if he can bring Corazon back to life, which it's not gonna happen, and Law knows this. But this sends Doflamingo into a rage, and he sends so many shots into Law's already tore up body. And Luffy sees Law's lifeless body and is pissed. He's pissed. Luffy is pissed. But little did everybody know, Law switched his body out with an already dead pirate fodder. And out of nowhere, Law decides to switch himself with Luffy and hits Doflamingo in one of the most satisfying cinematic pieces of art, in my opinion. I'm a glazer of Dressrosa, but this is so sick. He hits him with a gamma knife, damaging, I was gonna say destroyed, but kind of destroyed, but really damaging super bad Doflamingo's organs. It's such an aura farmer kind of moment, and I could watch Dressrosa. Oh, I've watched Dressrosa like 8 times. There might be something wrong with me. But Doflamingo's Devil Fruit gives him the ability to heal himself, his insides. Luffy then throws Law down to Robin's group in the flower garden area so he can be out of harm's way and, get patched up. And not too long after this, Luffy is fighting Doflamingo, but Luffy runs out of energy in Gear 4, and Law goes on to protect Luffy for the 10 minutes that Luffy needs for the rest so he can get back his stamina and energy. But we all know Luffy goes on to defeat Doflamingo here, and it's gorgeous. I don't know, glazer once again. And after the defeat of Doflamingo, the crew and Law are resting at an old house that is Kuros's for 3 days. Before finding out that the Marines were in pursuit of them, they gear up and get going. But while all the chaos is happening, Law is separated from the group and has a secret conversation with Sengoku, which this moment in particular has sparked a lot of controversy around Law, and we'll get into it in his theory video that's coming out a day after this. And in this conversation, they are talking about Corazon and how Law is AD. And on their way out of Dressrosa, this is where the Grand Fleet was created. Unfortunately, Law is not a part of the Grand Fleet, but in my heart, Law is basically a straw hat, okay? And soon after this, they were moved to Bartolomeo's ship, and this is where Law finds out that his bounty has been raised to 500 million, and he is no longer a warlord of the sea at this point. But they are still continuing to make their way to Zhao. And now Law has finally completed 2 steps in his big plan of taking down Kaido. And after finally making it up to Zhao, he is reunited with his crew. I love seeing when the captains find, even if they're like fodder captains, like reuniting with their crew. It's such a pure moment, but Beppo lives in my heart rent free, so I'm always like, yes, it's Beppo. And then they go on to find out about Sanji's situation, but the next day, the leaders of the Minks take Law and Luffy up to talk to Raizo, and they see the road poneglyph. And this is where they find out the truth about Momo and Wano and stuff. And this just goes along with him trying to take down Kaido, so he's like with it. And they all decide to make a Minks Ninja Pirate Samurai alliance here with the plans of taking out Kaido and liberating Wano. After they get the situation of Zunisha almost falling over with Luffy's group going to Whole Cake Island to rescue Sanji, and Law's group going to Wano. And while lying low in Wano, Law ends up confronting Hawkins, saying that he's after his life. They have a little bit of a back and forth. Nothing too major happens here, but eventually they reunite with Luffy. Luffy finally makes it to Wano, where they make their way up to Oden's castle and talk about the plans of defeating Kaido. And Kaido, the legend himself, decides to show up in dragon form. Peak cinematography here. I was upset. I was glued to my TV when I was watching this. But he shows up because Luffy and Zoro were causing mischief not too long before this, where Kaido goes on to destroy Oden's castle, and they both think that their crews are cooked. Luffy goes on to engage with Kaido while Law has to make his escape after being attacked by Hawkins, where he makes his way to Ebisu town with some of the Straw Hats, and not too long after this, Law's crew is captured by the Beast Pirate. And as he was going to try to rescue his crew, he is once again confronted by Hawkins, but Law couldn't attack him because Hawkins put his crew, Law's crew, in his puppets, and that's Hawkins' devil fruit. Is like a voodoo situation. So they devise a plan, Law for his crew, and not too long after this, with the help of X-Drake, Law gets out of the situation, escapes, but not before giving Hawkins his lashings, thank God. And now it's the night of the Fire Festival, when everything is supposed to go down. And after the big 3 Aura farm on the Beast Pirate's fodder outside of Onigashima, they continue to make their way to Onigashima, where Law's crew makes their way behind Onigashima and ends up finding a poneglyph, but he's not really worried about this one because it's blue. And now we make our way to Roof Piece. And this is where we see Kid, Law, and Luffy aura farming on top of Onigashima, sparring with Big Mom and Kaido. But Law goes on to do crazy damage to Big Mom and Kaido with Gamma Knife and Counter Shock respectfully, and it's just so satisfying to watch. It's some of my favorite movesets in the whole series. I love Law, okay? And then Law suggests that they should separate the two because they are too good together, okay? And on the Roof Piece, I want to point out, Law was like really saving lives, okay? He saved Zoro a few times, Luffy, the Scabbards. I have so much respect for him. I'm sorry. But then Kid and Law end up working together to separate Big Mom from Kaido and Zeus and her other powerful homies away from Big Mom. And this is where Big Mom falls off Onigashima. But Law ends up teleporting himself and Zoro down below the roof, entrusting Luffy with the task of taking out Kaido. But Big Mom ended up making it back into the castle. And this is where Law forms another pirate alliance with Kid, with the objective of taking out Big Mom. And the most underrated fight in all of Wano officially begins. And this is where we find out Law's devil fruit was actually awakened. And soon after, we see the tactician go to work, stabbing Big Mom through the neck, hitting her with the infamous K-Room shock Willy. I keep saying it, but I need you guys to understand. I know there's law stands out there, but this is just so satisfying to watch. I'm gonna fall back. I'm trying not to glaze, but and this definitely hurts Big Mom, but it more pisses her off more than anything. And she ends up powering up by stealing the souls of the fodder that are around. And they once again go on to spar for a little bit until Big Mom gets the upper hand, and she thinks that she defeated both Kid and Law, and she's trying to make her way back up to Kaidou. But Law says, and hits her with the Shock Willy again. So iconic, so iconic. And they begin to go back and forth once again. And as the fight begins to become more and more intense, he coats Kikoku with K-Room, which is his sword, stabbing her through the chest, making the sword long enough to pierce through Onigashima all the way to Wano's soil, all while being torched by Big Mom's hockey fist. Which is crazy. That is a crazy. I was like, damn. And finally hitting her with his most devastating attack that we see, Puncture Willy. Concealing her screams with K-Room, like Korra is like a quiet room. He coated her with a quiet room, and it's just so eerie. Kind of, like just seeing her scream out in pain. Wow, it's just like how he was in the chest, and she's just falling to her death. It's cinematic. But with Kid and Law winning this long and hard battle, they are celebrated by their crews respectfully, and Luffy ends up defeating Kaidou, as we all know, and this completes Law's plan of taking out an Emperor of the Sea. Not only did he take out one, he took out two. And a week after the raid on Onigashima, Law finds out that his bounty has jumped from 500 million to 3 billion berries, which is insane, next level, and it's deserved. They took out a fucking Emperor of the Sea, unheard of. Two of Rox's crews, two members of Rox's crew, it's nothing. But he goes on to see Old Wano with Robin, and he ends up seeing the road poneglyph, getting a sketching of the poneglyph, and the whereabouts of Pluton. Law gives the other two captains, Luffy and Kid, a rubbing of the poneglyph that he found, because it's just, they did this together. I know Law definitely gives off that hard shell, but he's still he knows Luffy is his bestie. We all know it, okay? Leaving Wano and ending the pirate alliance that they started at the beginning of the time skip, going their separate ways. And post Wano, a few days after departing, Law's crew is making their way to the next island, where he suddenly runs into Blackbeard's crew. Getting hit with Doc Q's ability in turning Law into a woman? Question mark? But Law ends up making it to the island, and Blackbeard tells him that he wants his road poneglyphs, and Law says, okay, winner takes it all. So Law is prepared for this. He just fought Big Mom, he's real beefed up right now. Law hits Doc Q's horse Stronger, where Blackbeard is riding, with our room amputee slicing the horse in two, making Blackbeard fall into the sea. This is one of those moments. This is one of those hype moments, okay? I was seeded for this fight. And eventually the two end up going back and forth with moves like Shock Willy and Black Vortex from Blackbeard respectfully. But Law really ended up getting jumped, okay? Law is the strongest person on his crew. I mean, it makes sense for a captain, but his crew is very weak. And Blackbeard has the plans of killing Law and taking his devil fruit, saying that he should take his heart back to the 100 pirates that he helped defeat during the Rocky Port incident. They'd be happy to see his heart, that he has his heart. That's some real diabolical shit. But as Blackbeard goes to make his move on Law, Beppo turns Sulong and taking out most of the Blackbeard pirates, and the two end up escaping this island, leaving the rest of the Heart Pirates behind. And this is the last we see of Law. But before I get to the ranking and the predictions, I I kind of want to glaze, okay? Law's impact in the story is insane, okay? Like, he made most of the post-time skip era about, not really about him, but really it was about him. It was all his planning. It was his prerogative. Yes, our main cast did their big ones, and Sanji even had a whole arc by himself and stuff. I'm not saying that he took away from the cast, but he really pushed them to where they are now. And out of all 8 arcs post time skip, his presence was felt. He was here for 5 of them. Is that not insane to you? He's one of the most important and integral side characters of all time. We will respect him. That's why he is one of the most tactical pirates on the sea. And I'm gonna keep saying it. Shout out to Law. He really changed the story. Let's be real. Now for my Law predictions. Now I know Law was defeated, utterly defeated. The Heart Pirates were decimated, okay? But he's not dead. The next time we see Law, he will be trying to go and get his crew from Blackbeard. And another prediction I have, we will see him in the final war. I just feel it. I feel like he was so integral in the post-time skip that he will be there in that final war. And ultimately, this might be the biggest prediction. I think Law will die. At the end of the story, I think Law dies. And the way he does die is giving Luffy the eternal life procedure, because I just have a feeling Luffy's gonna not win the first fight with Emu. And Law has saved Luffy many times before, and Luffy has saved Law many times as well. But Law really talks a lot about the D and how important it is, and he's put his life on the line several times over this situation. And I think because of all this put together, it will be a fitting end for one of the most beloved One Piece characters of all time. I am giving Law the rank S. I have to. From his impact to the story, he was in 1/3 of the story, helping the main cast of the story, and he has a more important role to play in the story of One Piece. That's just how I feel. I don't know. You guys need to respect Law more, you know? After doing these videos, I do have a more found respect for these characters, even though I already respected them, but doing this deep dive into them and really fleshing it all out really makes me respect the characters more. Because if you want to talk about impactful characters in One Piece, Law is up there. He's in the top 3. It is what it is. After the Straw Hats got back from their first, full adventure in Fishman Island, he immediately signs up an alliance with Luffy, okay, to take down an emperor. And that saga, the Emperor Saga, took so long, but in a good way. I'm not saying it was bad. I love how the story played out, and I kind of thank Law because I love Dressrosa. I really do love Wano, and the fact that they all flipped a coin basically to see who goes where after Wano, it's all because of Law. He is a tactician of the sea. Shout out to Law. But go check out my other Warlord rankings. I just uploaded my Boa Hancock ranking, so go check that out with my Buggy, Crocodile, Mihawk, and Moria rankings. I just find the Warlords to be exciting. Okay, they were an exciting part in the story for me, and I've always wanted to rank them. I don't know, but I'm taking it serious. Okay, I really am. But I guess that's it. Make sure you like and subscribe. Bye, motherfuckers.